Hello, one and all, and welcome to another episode of Baggers Chat. After a few weeks, or even a few months, I think, since our last episode, obviously straight after the trade period, we are back. And as always, I'm joined by Ethan Daffy. How are you, mate?
I'm good, mate. Once again, another exciting period for the football club, bringing in some youngsters, hopefully, and some guns, hopefully.
110%, mate. What have you been up to? I've heard a bit of uni has been completed, mate, in the past few weeks.
Yeah, just finished our last exam yesterday, I think. Yesterday it was. Yeah. So just focusing on, Baggers Chat and just thinking about all the possibilities of Carlton next year, being the nuffy I am. But yeah.
HD, I expect.
Yeah, but lock, mate. Every subject.
Mate. Lock. Speaking about the lock, no, we'll move on from that. Obviously, recently, I think the news that has come out within the club, probably about a few weeks ago, but obviously Brad EBERT becoming the new development coach at the Carlton Football Club, which has been, of course, taking over Dan O'Keefe, who was a vital member of the team. And I think it's good just because we spoke about before we went on air. Obviously, he was a player under Voss when he was assistant coach at Port Adelaide. And I think it's good that Voss has probably brought him over. But overall, what's your thoughts on that, Daff?
Yeah, just good to get a good footy head. I think he has over 300 games for the Power. So obviously, Vossi sees something in him. And I'm sure he'll be looking to, prove himself as a coach. And obviously, in the end, he's probably wanting to become a head coach in, years' time. But I think he's also helping out with the VFL. I don't think he's the head coach like Dan O'Keefe was, but I think he might be an assistant at the VFL.
Yeah, because when did he retire? 2020, I think it was.
Yeah, I think so.
So I wonder if he's done any coaching. Obviously he would have been interested, but I wonder if he did anything this year, even last year. I'm not too sure, but maybe something in the VFL or Sandford, something like that. But no, I reckon that's awesome. And it's good that, because you see this a lot more now with coaches, that you kind of get them straight out of the AFL. As soon as they retire, you get them in. Yeah. And speaking of one of the players that have retired that's actually moved on to be a coach is, of course, our former player, Cade Simpson. He's actually now moved to Hawthorn, which I think it's good on him. Like, a lot of people say, oh, yeah, no, like, that's just shit. But, like, it's good on him because we don't really need Simo. And I think his logic, his experience as well, I think that will be fantastic for Hawthorn, an upcoming team in the making. So I think it will be great. But obviously, this episode, we'll be trying to focus a little bit more on the draft, the upcoming draft in a few weeks' time. I'm not sure the exact dates, but I think it's 20th or something. It's something around there of November. So very soon, it's coming soon. It's actually come out of nowhere, to be honest. But I think I'm really excited about what's actually to come. Obviously, we're trying to speak about potentially bringing some picks in to take some picks out to try and get higher in the draft. I'm not too sure if that will happen, but we'll obviously get stuck into that a little bit later on. But right now, our picks as it stands, we have pick 10, pick 29, pick 49, and pick 66. And obviously, we'll just kind of take some players that we kind of think that we might bring into the club. But Daffy boy, take us through our first prospect.
Yeah, so we'll start off with Matt Jefferson from the Oakley Chargers, obviously Vic Metro. He's a 195 centimetre and 78 kilo key forward. He does look good. I was looking through a few of the guys' highlights, little highlight packages they have these days, and he just looks like that kind of explosive kind of forward. He does get it done at Vic Metro level, which is a very high level. He did have a fracture in his leg at the end of the NAB League campaign, so I think he had a couple of weeks off and then went to the Vic Championships. I think it wasn't too long ago, like near the grand final. I think they had a Vic Metro, Vic Country grand final, and he kicked 2 goals and actually the late winner to win the game for Vic Metro. So he does look the goods. Obviously, these guys are talking about now are the pick 11 prospects. He's ranked around 8 to 11 mark. I think he might go a little bit earlier than pick 11, but For you, Pato, what's your thoughts on like bringing in a key forward like that? Obviously, he's 195, so he'd be about, kind of a Silvani kind of height wise. What are your thoughts on that?
I know, like when we were kind of talking about the trade talk, like episodes when we were kind of going through the draft and also maybe even bringing in a player. And my big thing actually going through the draft was a key forward. Like it really was. I really want to bring in a key forward because let's face it, we've got Mackay, Kerno, Silvani. Silvani's not really a key forward in my opinion. Like he's probably like, of course, his height is key forward, but he's that more you know what I mean. He's that more small. He plays smaller than what he actually is. So that's the thing. I think with Jefferson, I think that will be a good get, but there's one name that we'll kind of get stuck into a little bit later. I know that you're really keen on him, but I know that you've kind of turned me towards that player. But I think even if that player is taken or we're even focusing on Jefferson, I think it will be great. But yeah, like as you said, I think when they start to get that experience of the NAB League and all the championships, all that stuff, and all the scouts watching, you kind of want to see how they go. And yeah, I think Jefferson looks the goods. I've seen some highlights and stuff from him. So as you said, he's a good height. 78 kilos is quite light, but obviously he'll try and he will put on some size. So I think it's good. But 04, that makes me feel old. 04, if he's born in 04,
I was
so.
talking to a few of the boys before this, and I was like, Jesus, 04.
04.
Like I'm only 20, but I feel old.
Yeah. It's just crazy, isn't it? Because I'm 01. You're 02, aren't you, Duff? Yeah, 02.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Price will get old, but no, we'll move on. So obviously to the next player. Take us through the next player, Duffy boy.
Yeah, so Ollie Hollands, the brother of Elijah Hollands from the Gold Coast Suns.
Yeah, Gold Coast.
So he played at the Murray Bush Rangers and Vic Country. I think he made his senior debut. I don't know what club it was when he was like 14, 15. So he's playing senior footy at 15 years old. So obviously he's 183 centimeters, 71 kilos, and he's a midfielder. So he actually was the equal first in the 2K time trial, which is amazing, with a 554 time, which is like nuts. Like getting below 6 minutes is fantastic. So obviously with him, it's his running capacity. That's the big part of his game. I think earlier, I think a few months ago, he's probably, around that kind of 15, 18 pick mark, but now he's really coming, and he looks like around, 10 to 12. And I think he's the perfect guy. Like you said before, I think he is the guy we can bring in, and realistically, I think we will. Like I stated before we came on here, he actually played half back for some games for the Murray Bush Rangers, which is kind of good in a way. I think it's a Boyd or a Saad might go down and get the young fella in a half back. But what's your honest thoughts on this? Because I think he fits our bill well, just in terms of midfield depth. We kind of, I think we need a few more players in that kind of group.
Yeah, it is a tough one, because you kind of think that we do have a lot of midfielders, but genuinely, I don't know if we have a lot of young midfielders. Like, we have a lot of young players like a Motlop or a Kemp or a Philp, but Philp hasn't played a lot. He's probably more of that mid forward, but we don't have a genuine midfielder that's a young, other than probably our youngest player is probably like a Paddy Dow. So, as you said, I think he looks really good. And I really like that obviously he's a blue bagger. So if we bring him in, you just know that he's going to have that heart like a Silvani or like a Cottrell or like a Doherty. All these guys who used to actually barrack for the club. I think will be great. But as you said, I think that's the main thing that a lot of these teams that like these young kids who are actually playing, they don't want to see how they go in this one role. Like, they actually try and put them in other roles and actually see how they go, because that's what is appealing to the clubs. That's actually appealing to the AFL clubs, is they don't want to just see him in the midfield and just playing in the guts. They actually want to see how they go playing in the half back like a Saad role, or playing half forward in a Jack Martin role. Like, you don't want to just see him in the guts and just see him shine like that, because straight away, if he does half decent in those roles, yes, he might be drafted as a midfielder. He might start as a midfielder at Carlton, but then straight away they think, well, this is what he did when he was playing for the Bushrangers last year in the halfback flank. Why not transition him there? So I think stuff like that, I think that's what we're starting to see a little bit more now with players, especially younger players that are actually trying to crack into the senior side. But as you said, I think it's great to get a player like this in, kind of develop him for a few years. Don't have him in like a Paddy Dow straight away into the guts. Like, you need to develop him into the VFL like a Mackay did. So yeah, I'm excited, Daff.
Yeah, I just think with him I think we just need that. For me, I think, he could definitely, like the way he's been playing at the back end of last year, or this year, sorry, in the NAB League, he could definitely make a debut early in the year. I think his running capacity is at elite level already, and he hasn't even trained with an AFL club yet. So I think he's, compared to the likes of, an Ed Langdon, who just up and down running all day, which is, it'd be perfect to have, that type of player on the wing and can really challenge LOB and Cottrell in that wing spot.
Yeah. So if we were to bring in Hollands, where would you expect him to see him play if he was to get a senior spot?
I think it has to be the wing. I think it has to be, yeah, because I just think you look at our forwards, you'd almost rather that natural forwards like, Durdens and Martins and Silvanis. I think the wing kind of, it takes pressure off, but the way his two-way running is fantastic. So I think, if he does well enough, you could see an early debut for mine.
Yeah. And we speak about like how he's kind of like maybe trying to get a spot for O'Brien or Cottrell, but you remember on the other wing, you have a guy like Akers. So if you have a guy like Akers and you have, like, I reckon Akers will be a genuine best 22 every single week with what we've seen from him from Fremantle. So if you expect Cottrell, O'Brien and Hollands all to play their best footy every single week and force them to play their best footy, it's a good problem to have. So I'm really excited. But I think you've turned me on to this guy. So I think I'm really excited about what this guy might bring. But obviously we'll see what happens draft night. But we'll move on from Hollands to now a player which it's quite an interesting last name, Daffy Boy. But I'll get you to pronounce it.
Yeah, so Josh Weddle from the Oakley Chargers, obviously played for Vic Metro, 192 centimeters, 89 kilos. So he's got good size about him at his age, and he's also a key defender. So I think we have touched on this a little bit in the key defensive stocks.
We have.
It hurt us last year a little bit. Honestly, I think it hurt us making finals and making a run just due to the injuries we had. It was unlucky, but it got to a point where we had to play, Sam Durden after he was at the club for half a week. So we'll continue on Josh Weddle, but he was a standout at the draft combined. I think he was top 10 in the running vertical jump, 20-meter sprint in the 2 Cape time trial for his size. And, I think he's that kind of athletic key defender, like a Marchbank or all types of players like a Darcy Moore. I think you see more of those players these days down back that can really suit, being next to a Wiedering where you can go up third man. But he does look the goods. And what are your thoughts, Pato? Because personally, I wouldn't mind bringing in, a young key defender to really develop under, Lewis Young and Jacob Wiedering.
Yeah, spot on. And obviously we'll touch on later on about maybe the picks that we might bring in, but what we're kind of seeing with maybe giving up that pick 10 to actually maybe slide a little bit back further into the draft, but we get 2 of the same picks around that time, we might be able to bring in a Hollands and a Weddle. Weddle? Well, I thought it was Weddle. Weddle. See, that's why I didn't want to pronounce it, because I know that you pronounce it a lot better than I ever will. So Weddle. But yeah, I think if we were to bring in a guy like that, as you said, like we've got Wiedering, Young. Other than that, it gets kind of narrow. Like we've got like a Kemp, but we drafted him as a midfielder. Like we don't really have many other key forwards, key backs that might be able to fill in that role if Wiedering or a Young, touch wood, goes down. And like Marchbank, obviously he had a great end to the year. Like he got some games into him that you just can't trust him just yet. But we know how good he can be. But I think, as you said, I think it would be great if we could bring in a guy like Weddle, because it's that key defender that you can develop for a few years in the VFL and also test a spot for a Wettering or a Young, because it's guys like that like, yes, they're going to get a best 22 spot every single week, but if they don't perform and you got a guy like Weddle who is actually keeping a guy in the VFL who's a genuine AFL player to 0 goals, you have to look at that. So it's stuff like that excites me, because see these players who right now, all these players in the draft are all very talented, but you just want to see how they actually go in AFL level. So, as you said, I think the only way that we can get this guy in, because I know that a lot of clubs will look at Weddle as well. Like a lot of clubs are looking for a key defender that is quite young. So, if he's still there, maybe if we have even a pick 29, like obviously, I think we'll get Hollands first, but we'll move on from the big Weddle. And obviously now to a new player that you would take us through, Duffy boy.
Yeah, so this is the last of the pick 11 prospects, of the players that are kind of ranked around the pick 11. They're all, I think Cam McKenzie might be, I think he's around kind of 8 to 13 mark. And sometimes it's really hard to really, put your finger on what they're really rated, because you never know what, internally what clubs want and what they, need and et cetera. But this is another midfielder from the Sandy Dragons, Cam McKenzie. He's 187 centimeters and 80 kilos. So, pretty good height, pretty good size. And obviously he had like a point of difference when he was playing at NAB League level. So I think he finished, he played in the NAB League Grand Final that Sandy won, obviously, quite comfortably. He had 26 touches and 2 goals. So a midfielder getting on the scoreboard is always good. You see guys like Paddy Cripps that can really impact the game going forward. But yeah, as it says here, he can mark above his head, stand under a high ball, gets his handballs out quick. It's giving me Cripper vibes. I know he's a little bit shorter, obviously at 187, but just being able to press forward and impact while he's in the middle. So what are your thoughts on Cam McKenzie, Pato?
As you said, I think he will be that Cripper type because obviously he's 187 centimeters and 80 kg, which is that's pretty solid for a 18 or 17-year-old, like 18 or 19-year-old. So I think that's the thing, because why haven't we really been talking about McKenzie when we've been talking more about Hollands? Like, I think that's just because we know that we've got a Cripper for a lot more years, and you don't want to have a guy like McKenzie who's waiting there for 5 or 6 years and he still hasn't gotten that gig to actually play in the senior side. But what I will say also is I'm glad that McKenzie's a Victorian and he's also from Sandy, because that's what you see a lot now with these draftees, is that they get drafted to a club that is interstate, they get homesick, and in 2 years' time, even 1 year, like even a year after their one club, obviously Jason Horn-Francis, straight away gone. So that's what I'm kind of seeing, and I reckon that's what a lot of these clubs are seeing now. Like, you want to try and aim for players that that will stay at the club, because you don't want to waste a pick 11 pick. Like, it's a pretty handy pick, and you don't want to waste these kinds of players, because we saw it with Horn-Francis, which obviously is gonna that's pretty disappointing. So I think it's good that, I think he's also a former Bo Morris player as well. So he played for the Sharks, which is obviously local to Sandy. So I think he looks the goods. But yeah, once again, I just think it's all these guys that they look really good in the highlights when they play the TAC Cup and all this stuff, but it's more just like how they actually perform in the actual senior side.
Yeah, too easy, mate. So we'll move on to the pick 29 prospects, obviously our second highest pick of the draft, pending if we do end up trading it. But more likely than not, I think we will keep these picks unless we turn 29 and, pick 49 into something higher. Who knows? I'm sure Nick Austin's got something under his sleeve. But the first prospect for me is Max GRUZEWSKI, which is another tough surname, but I think I got it down pat there. But
I reckon you got that spot on.
Yeah, so this guy's a bit of a swingman. He's a key defender and forward. He's played both ends of the ground for the Chargers and both Chargers and Metro. 193 centimeters, 84 kilos. So he's got good size about him, which I like to see. I think his main strengths marking, obviously at that size, can intercept as a defender, creates play from half back, which is, I think that's the way our defense kind of plays. You know, Wiedering is really good with the ball. Marchbank's really good with the ball. Obviously, you got Gov in there when he is playing. But yeah, I think GRUZEWSKI missed a chunk of the year with injury, returned later in the year, and I think there was a big mark in the Vic Metro's grand final that he took. I remember them yelling out GRUZEWSKI or something like that.
That's right.
I was like, that's an odd name, but I think did you see the video with the bloke who collapsed for the 2K time drop? Have you seen that video?
Was that no?
Combine, yeah. So a guy collapsed. Hey, it wasn't him. It wasn't
Okay.
him, but he actually helped him out. So shows that he's a good lad. But
Exactly.
for you, what are your thoughts on bringing in a GRUZEWSKI who can, play both ends of the ground?
Yeah, I'm excited to hear our BT say GRUZEWSKI. What is it? GRUZEWSKI? Oh, I'm not even too sure. But one thing that I know that a lot of experts with the draft and former AFL players that are kind of seeing the draft kids now is you don't want to have too many strings to your bow. You don't want to have too many strings to your bow. So yes, you kind of see their key defender forward. Yeah, that's appealing, but you don't want to have him as yet you're playing half as a key defender, half as a key forward, because you don't like that. That worries me a little, because why isn't he a genuine key defender, or why isn't he a genuine key forward? Like, I reckon from what I've seen, he's playing a little bit more as a key defender.
Yeah.
And I think it will be good if you can bring him in as a key defender, but also knowing mentally that you can transition him forward. But yeah, that's one thing that I've heard a lot about these experts that are actually saying about these players, that you don't want to have too many strings to your bow. So, as you said, I think there's a lot of options that we can kind of choose. I think with this later pick, we're going to try and get a key defender or forward. I think we have to. But if it kind of depends on what we get with that first pick, because if we get a midfielder for our first pick, I don't think we'll get another midfielder. I don't think we should. But yeah, like as you said, I'm seeing photos now, and yeah, like he actually helped. Lewis Hayes, I think it was. Lewis Hayes was the guy that actually fainted during the run. But as you said, I just think it's good that these players they're actually good people. You don't want to have like guys who are like, obviously this guy wasn't a top 5 draft pick like prospect in a way. So you want to have guys that actually know that are good people, as you said. But I think it's good, Duff.
Yep, too easy, mate. And we'll move on to the next one. It's a midfielder. So I've kind of based it off different kind of positions. Obviously, when you're later in the picks, you kind of look at different types of players. Like you said, you obviously top 15, a lot of midfielders, unless they're an absolute superstar forward or back. Obviously, there's a few in there, but a lot of them are midfielders. And it looks like we're going to get Hollands if we do have pick 11. This is another midfielder. So from the Dandenong Stingrays, Mitch Sibkowski. We like the skis here in pick 29, but he's a midfielder, 185 centimeters and 86 kilos. He's a big boy. I watched a few of his highlights. I think it was Baseline Footy or one of those Instagram pages, and he's got good size about him. So he actually placed top 10 in the vertical jump test at the draft combine, considering his size. So that is good to see. He averaged 23 in the NAB league, and was also a regular ball getter for Vic Country. He's a bigger frame, so obviously he outmuscles at stoppage, and then obviously has a penetrating kick going forward, which is fantastic. There's midfielders, that are big but can also use the ball. I feel like a George Hewitt can do that. Matt Kennedy, and obviously you got Cripper there as well. But for you, Pato, what's your overall thoughts on bringing in a midfielder at pick 29?
As I said, I just think it's just gonna have to depend on that first pick, or that first, like if we get higher up in the draft with that pick 10, it just depends on what we bring in. Because as we mentioned before, I think it's appealing that he's a Victorian boy. So if we bring him in, I think it will be good. But as I said, I just think it's really down to what we kind of choose to do with the pick 10 or pick 11, whatever it turns out to be, and what we kind of give up for that to maybe slide up a little bit lower in the draft. But it just depends on what we kind of bring in. Because I know with me, I don't want to bring in two midfielders, but I'm not too sure what you think. But yeah, that's just my thought.
Yeah, I don't like the dynamic of bringing in two mids. I think we've got a Carroll in who can play. He's looking big in preseason,
Yeah.
which is great to see. What is he, 19? I think we got him as an 18-year-old, so he's got plenty of time ahead of him. He's already got a few games into him, but if we pick up a Sipkowski, I'm sure he's got potential to become a hardworking midfielder and can replace a George Hewitt later down the track or some other midfielders. But we'll move on. This is I think it's the first out of Victoria player I've got here on the prospects, and this is our final prospect with pick 29, Harry Barnett. He's a 202 centimetre, 97 kilos, ruckman from West Adelaide. So I think he is looked at as probably the number one genuine ruckman in the draft, a pure ruckman. There's nowadays a lot of Luke Jacksons that can, they're ruckman, but they're not like big fellas like a big Cruz or a big Pitto but this guy looks like the real deal. And considering he's a big fella, he ran 6:32 in the 2K time trial and had a 3-second 20-meter sprint. So he's some of these kids, seriously, they are. They're going to be genuine stars, and it's good to see. But he averaged 18 touches in the under-18s competition and also had a few games at senior level for West Adelaide in the Sandful. Pato, what are your thoughts on bringing in a ruckman? Because I personally wouldn't mind it.
I completely agree. I wouldn't mind it, but depending on what we do with Alex Murkov.
Yeah.
That's one thing. What do we do? Because I like having 4 ruckmen. And if we choose to have Silvani as that second ruck, what's the point of having 3 ruckmen in the VFL? I know during the year we really wanted that ruckman when a pit net went down. We really needed that second ruck. But I mean, as you said, I think I wouldn't mind it and that's what we're seeing a lot more now with these talented players. It's just they're bringing other aspects to their game. Like a ruckman, when you see a ruckman do a 3-second 20-meter sprint, like you'd see like a Sean Darcy, you would do like maybe 8 seconds in a 20-meter sprint every week. But nah, as you said, I just think it's odd that you see this ruckman who's that guy who's a genuine ruckman. Because as you said, he's usually that guy who transitions forward. But maybe that's what we need. Like, I'm not too sure. But yeah, other than that, the one thing that I'm not too sure about is the South Australian. That it just always gets me. It always gets me. But yeah, I'm not too sure, Duffy boy.
Yeah, I agree, but I think as a football club now, I think we're good enough to be able to keep these players. I think you look at Horn Francis and you look at the club he's leaving. They're not particularly fantastic and very stable at the current minute, are they? So I can't believe I'm saying that Carlton are actually stable, but it's so you got guys like Jesse Mollop and who are from WA and Darwin, different places. So it's good to see. But yeah, that's it for the prospects, mate. Anything else to touch on?
I'm pretty excited. I'm not too sure about you, Duffy boy, but I'm pretty excited to what we actually might do with who we bring in, because especially with Austin with his powers, I think he can actually get something done. But with if we are to keep our pick 11 and pick 29, who do you think is the player that you might bring in? So obviously out of our prospects that we've gone through, if you could pick one for pick 11, who would you pick?
I think it has to be Ollie Hollands. We've been talking about him the last few days, and I just think he's too good to pass up. Hopefully, he isn't picked before we have the pick. I don't think he will. I think I think we'll have him. There's just there's something about him that I think we'll just get him. I think it's just going to work out. But the draft, you never know. A stupid club like Essendon or something might pick him up before us. So. At their shitty little pick 5. So, no, I think we can get him. He's a good runner and looks the goods for mine.
Yeah, spot on. Completely agree. If I was Austin and I was on the clock, 2 minutes I think it is, and I was like, I wonder who I'm gonna get. Now, I reckon I'll definitely draft Ollie Hollands. So I think it will be great to bring him in. But pick 29. If you were to pick someone who he's obviously out of those three players, but maybe even a slider, because we're kind of looking at a pick 11, but a couple of those players might slide. Like, the odds of it probably aren't high, but is there anyone who you might see sliding? But if not, out of those three, who would you pick?
Yeah, it is tough to pick a slider, isn't it? They're ranked pretty high, those guys. We've talked about with the pick 11 prospects. I just don't see them really sliding. But for mine, I think it's been a few Phantom drafts have said we're going to pick him, and I think the big GRUZEWSKI, taking some hangers down back, sitting on blokes' heads and stuff like that. But I know, I think he looks really good. He's got good height, 193. 193 it's a good height because you can still kind of be able to defend a smaller player. Obviously, Weeders be 196, I think 196, 195. So I guess it's not too much of a difference, but he does look the goods. And being able to go up forward, obviously, we've got the forward line pretty locked up at the moment with two blokes signing on for 7 and 8 years, respectively, with Harry Mackay and Charlie Keno. So I don't think that's a worry for us. But yeah, if we can bring in a defender, can develop, and then, like you said, can challenge a Lewis Young for a spot, or honestly, I wouldn't mind just seeing a few guys just develop in the twos. And then when their time comes, that obviously they get in. But you know, like you said, I think with these key players, I think with these tall fellas, you know, you got your key positions like ruck, you know, full forwards, centre forwards, these big pillars, they've got to have time to develop. And I think that's worked out with Harry Mackay. Obviously, everyone was all anxious, going like, "Oh, we should be getting Harry in," but it actually ended up working well for him, and I think it can work well for GRUZEWSKI, mate.
Yep, absolutely spot on. And I think it's just a little bit interesting about Barnett because, as you said, I think he's that number one ruckman who is genuinely rated as that number one ruck, and I reckon he could get picked up before. So I don't know, like, there are a few clubs that might need that genuine ruckman. So it's interesting because if he is able to slide to pick 29, maybe, like, I mean, I don't know. Because as I said earlier, I don't want 4 ruckmen, and I don't want 4 rucks, and I don't want 1 ruck in the AFL side and 3 in the AFL side. But as you said, I completely agree. I can't wait till there's 100,000 at the G. Yelling out, Gruz! Like, a bit like Cruz, mate. A bit like Cruz, mate. How could it be? So yeah, I think I completely agree. I think it would be awesome to see just these young kids coming in, because it's just this. I reckon right now we are in the slot. These next 3 years, 4 years, we are in the premiership race. Like, we are in for the now. So I think it's good that these guys are kind of. I don't mind if they don't play VFL. I mean, AFL for a few years, because AFL every week, mate. No, I wouldn't mind if these players play a few VFL games when they're young, because Mackay, like, you saw a guy like Harry Mackay kind of transition, and even with the Crips, like, he kind of started off with the VFL. Yeah. Of course, he kind of transitioned straight into the AFL because he's just that good. But I think Harry Mackay is probably the big one that you kind of saw. We need to get him in. We need to get him in. No, keep him in the VFL. Just let him develop. Let him earn his stripes into the senior side, and that's exactly what he did. And my word, he's probably one of the best. He's probably one of the best key forwards going around now. So, anything else you want to add, Duffy boy?
Nothing. Just with Barnett. Yeah, like you said, I just think he could go higher in the draft, but he's weirdly, he was rated outside the top 30 about a month ago, and he's actually come up a bit. I think he's ranked about 28, 29. So, geez, when you look at it, it depends on the whole dynamic of the team next year. I think we can have 2 rucks. It's just tough because I think that last month, I don't think Pitto was 100% fit. Obviously, he had to do PCL surgery again, which was very odd. You know, the information from the club's been a bit weird on those injuries, but I think if we have Pitto and TDK fit, I think they both play personally. Yeah. Worked at the start of the year. Don't see why it can't work. But geez, if you bring a Barnett in who can, you know, dominate the twos for a year or two, and then when, you know, Pitto goes off, or you never know with TDK's whole situation. So you've just got to, you know, be ready for that.
Yep, complete. Yeah, like as you said, like with TDK, you don't know because his price is going up, so we might have to. I mean, we want to keep him 100%. We even want SDK, bring SDK over to Geelong, but he might have to look at maybe going elsewhere next year. So that's why we might need to get a genuine ruckman right now. So
yeah,
I don't think the club will look at it in that sense. I don't think they're going to look at it as, oh, TDK's gone next year, so we need Barnett. I hope they don't. But yeah, other than that, I think, as you said, I just think I know that I wouldn't mind having the 2 rucks as well. I think it worked great. Like, I think as soon as Pitnet went down, it was stiff on TDK because he was forced to play as that ruck. But I think it was good with TDK playing forward. Like, yes, his goal kicking wasn't as great, but he was marking. Like, fantastic. And he can get up the ground a bit and leave Harry and Charlie forward. So, yeah, I think you are absolutely analysed it well, Duffy boy. I was trying to think of the perfect word. I was trying to think of a little bit of a better word, but obviously me with my brain, it doesn't really work like that. So other than that, Duffy boy, is there anything else you want to add?
All good, mate. Looking forward to it. The draft night is the 28th of November, 28th. Monday, 28th. Lock it in. Well, other than that, thank you everyone for listening. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Let us know what you think of these episodes. Also, let us know what else you want to see in the future and moving forward into 2023. Hopefully, it's going to be a big year for the Carlton Football Club. Hopefully, it's going to be a big year for Baggers Chat. It will be a big year for Baggers Chat. So it's always been a pleasure, Duffy boy. And as always, up the Baggers!